Eagles Entertainment.
With the 10th pick in the 2021 NFL Draft, the Philadelphia Eagles select...
You're listening to the Journey to the Draft podcast.
Welcome to the Journey to the Draft podcast, presented by Life Brand. I'm your host, Fran Duffy, and we've got a great week of college football to break down as the Week 12 is in the books. But first, we've got Scout Stories, where I catch up with the Eagles Director of Player Personnel, Brandon Brown, to break down the safety position in the NFL Draft. How do you project those guys from the college level to the league? It's a really fun discussion, a really fun position to break down, and we're going to hit it all on there with Brandon at the very top of the show. Make sure you do not miss that discussion. After that, we've got Saturday Scouting, where we're going to keep the defensive discussion going. A bunch of the defensive players that have accepted invitations to the Senior Bowl. Ben and I are going to break that down, as well as get into our weekly takeaways from this weekend in college football. We have an Eagles fan mock draft to break down at the end with Draft Mailbag. As always, the best way to throw us your support, make sure you head on over to Apple Podcasts, leave us a rating, leave us a comment. If you've got a mock draft, player rankings, a question about a specific prospect or a position, anything that you want to know, make sure you go onto our Apple Podcast page, leave us the question there in the comment box. That is the best way to hit us up here on this show. We answer your questions each and every week, so make sure you head on over to Apple Podcasts. Really appreciate everybody that has thrown us your support in recent weeks. That said, let's get into the rest of this show. Excited to kick things off here with Scout Stories and Brandon Brown.
Pull up a seat. It's time for Scout Stories.
All right, well, this week here on Scout Stories, we are going to talk with Eagles Director of Player Personnel, Brandon Brown, to talk about the safety spot. Brandon, thanks so much for joining us here on the show.
Fran, pleasure to be with you, and thanks for having me on the podcast.
So let's talk about safety. And it's so fun because I feel like when you talk with scouts and you talk with evaluators, whether they're in the league, whether they're in the media now, you say, what are the toughest positions to evaluate? And number one, a lot of people will say quarterback. The next one people bring up is almost always safety. Well, what is it that makes safety such a tough position to evaluate?
Yeah, Fran, you hit on the head. You know, I think it is one of the more difficult positions to project and evaluate because of the mental rigors that happen pre-snap and, the responsibility in terms of making sure the rest of that back end is aligned where they need to be. And, the great safeties, in my opinion, are high-level communicators where they can align guys up, but also know and be in a position to make plays themselves and also have some savviness to them. It's almost, I call it like it's a game of chess, right? Where, the really good safeties, they can disguise, they know where they need to be at the snap of the ball, so they can disguise their alignment pre-snap. And it's almost a cat and mouse game played with the quarterback. And the guys that have a high mastery of that cat and mouse game, they know exactly on the timing of the nuance of, okay, well, this quarterback has a long, pre-snap cadence when he's at the line of scrimmage, or he's quick to get to the line of scrimmage. So, I can't tinker around with my alignments as much. And I just think it's such a, once you understand it, and you appreciate it, it's such a cool cat and mouse game to see because, it's a give and take. Sometimes the risk is worth the reward where you gamble, and sometimes you gamble wrong. And when you have the wrong gamble, that's when you see the explosive plays on the back end, or maybe a missed alignment that leads to an explosive play in the run game.
You and I have talked about linebacker in the past and the different sizes and shapes and usages of the guys that are playing linebacker. And I feel like that carries over to safety as well, right up the middle of the defense, where you've got guys not necessarily the different body types, but just the different usages, especially at the college game where, the differences in the hash marks results in safeties being used in so many different ways. It can be tough to be able to say, all right, well, and I say tough for us on the outside to be able to say, okay, well, this guy is going to be a great fit for what this team that I root for does. And it can be difficult to be able to make that projection.
100%. And like I said, I think the versatility is key. When you look at around the league and you look at some of the better safeties right now, when you can kind of put a lot of them in the same group, where you look at a lot of the more productive safeties, a lot of them have a corner background, going whether it's college or whether it's high school. And I say the corner background is interesting because I think more than anything, the number one most important trait is high intellect. That's king for me. But then versatility is too. When you look at guys that have a corner background, they have the ability to bump out and cover a slot. And as the tight end position becomes more versatile, and you have these F tight end, these pass catchers that, almost can function as overgrown wideouts where they can detach and line up in the slot and become mismatch threats. Well, when you have the mismatch threat, you have to have the problem solver. And I think that versatile safety is a part of the problem solving piece where you have the safety that has corner movement skills, but also is, maybe, 6 foot to 6'2". They present that matchup where I can handle the length of a tight end, but also I can handle the movement skills of a slot if I have to bump over. And it gives you more creativity from the defensive standpoint in coverage. You don't have to panic, and you also can handle more of these offensive sets from your base personnel without getting into subs. So I just think versatility is key when you have that high level of intellect and you have that covered versatility coupled with it.
And what's funny too is that 6, 7, 8 years ago, those guys that maybe had that versatile skill set would be viewed as tweeners. And we're like, I don't. He's too big to be able to play to be able to play corner. Not quite athletic enough to be able to play corner. Now it's like, give me as many of those guys as possible because it's a matchup league and teams are trying to find those mismatches. Whether it's at tight end, big slot receivers, whatever it is, they're trying to find those advantages.
No, 100%. And, I kind of go back when Brian Dawkins was here, I always told him, like, man, you were ahead of your time because being looked at as being, me on the smaller end there, back when he played, those guys that are in that realm, in that athletic, hey, you're more undersized than the old school traditional safety. That's what is at a premium right now. Because, range, explosiveness, versatility, plus being a high-level processor, that's what wins right now. And I think you look at more of those box-level safeties, those are the matchups that I think, keep the offensive side of the ball in a level of excitement because they know that, hey, I'm going to try to target this guy or isolate this guy. And even if you have the running backs in terms that are high-level pass catchers are so sophisticated where we are in this league and where we're going that they can even be a mismatch threat for these box safeties. And then you have these tight ends that are becoming better and better pass catchers as they come out from college that present a mismatch for that box safety. So I just think the problem solver is you have that guy in the back end that can help some of these coverage mismatches, but also help direct traffic because he's a high level intellect.
Yeah, the delineation between free safety, strong safety, post player versus box guy. Not only is it like, the box guys now are becoming linebackers. Like if you can't cover a linebacker, you're going to have trouble seeing the field as well. So it's such an interesting evolution of the position. And when you look back on that evolution, you look back on your evolution as an evaluator. Has there been an area where like, man, like I got this one piece of advice that really helped me early in my career when looking at the safety spot?
Yeah. And I think it goes into what we just talked about previous with the safeties maybe becoming a little bit maybe smaller or lighter is, don't dismiss a safety for lack of physical strength. If this guy is high level intellect, he processes quickly, he takes good drive angles and coverages, he plays with good leverage as a run defender. He's a willing tackler that can come to balance in space. And he can be a consistent wrap tackle guy. He may not have to be, an explosive thumper or, a guy that can create knockback on contact. But if he's a guy that has enough willingness as a tackler and takes consistent angles, once we get him on board, we can work on the physical strength component. And you see it all the time where guys that may be strength deficient, in year one, but they can always hang their hat on being able to cover and line up. And then it's once they're in your program, with the combination of the strength staff, player development, nutrition, it's our job to get them up to speed strength wise. But to me, if they can't line up from a physical component or they can't process, that's something that's hard to overcome. So the best advice I always was given was make sure those two things are staples in their game in terms of being athletic, being able to process, and then also being able to cover. And then, they can't be a coward, but we can work on the physical, in terms of the physical standpoint of functional strength.
When you have a guy that can check that many boxes as a defensive coordinator, offense is always presenting problems. If you have a guy that can present answers, that certainly can help you out. Brandon, this has been awesome. Thanks so much for talking about the safety spot, one of the more fun positions to chop it up about here in the NFL draft.
Fran, I appreciate you having me, and it was a pleasure being on the podcast.
So great stuff there from Brandon Brown. A couple quick takeaways from that. I love that the first thing he brought up wasn't any of the physical traits, none of the height, weight, speed stuff. It was all about the mental stuff, right? The pre-snap mental responsibilities, how you need a high-level communicator, and it's not just about the physical traits at the position. I think that was a big takeaway for me, hearing Brandon talk about the safety spot. And then he also said that versatility is the number 2 priority after the mental traits. Guys with that corner background and how valuable they are and how you need that problem solver, he said, for mismatched tight ends. I loved that that term, that moniker there for some of those guys on the back end. Those can be difficult players to find. So looking at that safety spot from that lens, I think was really interesting. And then even this is something we've talked about in recent months here on the show, is the comparison between safety and linebacker. Both guys playing up the middle on defense. You need a lot of the same traits, but you also are going to have all the differing skill sets and body types and so many different ways that you can play that position. And so I look at safety and linebacker very, very similarly, and I think a lot of the same traits that you need at one spot, you need them in another. I actually mentioned it in that conversation, right? That just because a safety can't cover, you can't just stick him at linebacker, because if you can't cover a linebacker, you're not playing either, right? So it's a really interesting juxtaposition between those two positions. And then the other thing, too, the advice he got early on, don't dismiss a safety for a lack of physical strength. If he's got good mental traits, he's athletic, and he can cover, all the rest is workable. All the rest can be improved upon. So I thought those were big notes there from Brandon Brown. Hope you guys have been enjoying these conversations with Scout Stories. We only have a few more on the books here coming up through the rest of the college football season. So after that, we're going to be getting into the pre-draft process. It's all coming so fast. Speaking of which, we're going to talk about some of these Senior Bowl acceptances. Last week on the show, Ben and I got into the top offensive players that have already accepted invitations to the Senior Bowl. This week, here in the early part of the episode, we're going to be breaking down the top defensive players that we've seen, all the defensive players that have accepted invitations to go to Mobile. Let's do that now. At the top of this next segment, it's time for Saturday Scouting. Hey, Eagles fans, get ready for the game each Sunday with an exclusive look at Eagles pregame warm-ups brought to you live each week when you join myself, Amy Campbell, and Eagles insider Dave Spadaro on the Kickoff Show presented by Exalta. We provide Eagles-focused analysis, late-breaking news, and the team perspective that you cannot get anywhere else. The Kickoff Show presented by Exalta can be seen live 50 minutes before kickoff on PhiladelphiaEagles.com, the Eagles mobile app, and the team's social media channels.
It's time for Saturday Scouting.
All right, well, like I said, let's get into a lot of news here on Saturday Scouting as I welcome in Ben Fennell. And Ben, last week, late in the week, we did all the Senior Bowl acceptances from the offensive side of the football, and the Senior Bowl has continued to run out name after name after name after name after name. And now we've got a bunch of defensive players to go through. And I think that'll just about catch us up. And then we'll only just have a handful here and there for the next couple of weeks. But let's go to the defense. And I'll start with Virginia Tech pass rusher Amare Barno, a guy that I studied over the weekend. This is a guy that started his career as a safety in high school in JUCO, then made the move to linebacker, and then eventually 2 years ago for Virginia Tech made the move to pass rusher. He's a high cut, very long, angular pass rusher. He doesn't have too much in terms of a pass rush repertoire, but this is a athletic speed rusher with that ability to impact the game off the edge. So that's Amare Barno, another guy that fits that same kind of mold. Dominique Robinson, you and I both studied him from Miami, Ohio.
Yeah, former high school quarterback, spent 3 years at receiver, really good size at 6'4", 250, put on some size, really interesting freak list profile over the summer for his wingspan and jumps, but really a raw edge rusher, doesn't know what he's doing. And was just a third down specialist last year, developing some moves, still ascending. He's got a long way to go there.
Yeah, and I think you could say the same thing about Western Kentucky's D'Angelo Malone. He's been stupid productive over the course of his career. He's been just racking up production for the Hilltoppers, but more of a lean pass rusher in terms of his skill set. So projects more as like a potential Sam linebacker or a rush linebacker, just a pure high side type of player, potentially even an off-ball option for a team moving into the NFL. Different body type, Michael Clemens from Texas A&M. He's another edge rusher that accepted the invite.
Yeah, he's kind of an inside-outside guy, good size at 6'5", 270, can play kind of stand-up edge and then slide into three tech and some sub-fronts, good run-pass defender. But, he spent some time in JUCO and 5 years at A&M, bit of an older prospect, but a guy that NFL teams love filling out their D-line room. He may be a day 3 pick, he may be a priority free agent, but these types of guys are all over the NFL filling up D-line rooms.
Let's get into some of these other defensive linemen, because a bunch of those combo guys, you mentioned Clemens has that inside-outside versatility, staying in the SEC. So does Zachary Carter from Florida. This is a guy, Ben, you've been pounding the drum for a couple of years. Former defensive end, has made the move more to an interior player, but he's got that combo skill set. I don't know that he's great in any one area, but checks a lot of boxes across the board. So Zachary Carter heading to Mobile, one of a couple Gators we'll talk about here today.
Yeah, very similar to Josh Paschal down at Kentucky. Very similar, 6'3", nearly 280, but he plays stand-up defensive end, 3 tech. He plays zero and some sub-front, really tough run defender, really, really strong player. Doesn't have a whole lot of twitch and bend, but he's a real good power player, and he contributes on special teams. He's been the personal protector. He'll run down on punt, punt coverage. He's a guy who reminds me a little bit of a Boogie Basham type. Where he's just kind of relentless and strong and really good size, can play all over the place. I think any NFL team would like a Josh Paschal.
Another kind of inside-outside guy, Logan Hall from Houston. We saw his team, the New Orleans Saints, took Peyton Turner in the first round out of Houston this past spring. Well, Logan Hall is a guy for Houston who also presents that similar kind of skill set. He's long. He's got inside-outside versatility. I love his motor. I love his speed in the open field. Still coming along as a pass rusher. Very similar, honestly, to Peyton Turner. And Turner ended up being a first-round pick. We'll see what comes of Logan Hall. Obviously, the Senior Bowl will be big for him. 2 more defensive linemen we want to get to, both more of the nose tackle type. I want you to talk about John Ridgway, the third from Arkansas.
Yeah, really fun player. He came over from Illinois State, the FCS program. That's actually kind of a powerhouse in the FCS, just a smidge behind North Dakota State, but they pump out NFL quality players year after year. But he's a nose tackle, went out to the SEC this year in Arkansas. Kind of an awkward nose tackle, though. He's 6'6", 325, really good length, really good size. He's got some range. He can make plays out to the numbers, but he's not this fat guy run plugger that's just going to clog up the rush lanes. He's a guy that's kind of nimble, kind of light on his feet. He can lock out, play the peekaboo game. He's a really fun player. I don't think he's going to be a nose tackle in the NFL, but he could be a really, really disruptive, maybe 3-tech, 1-tech combo.
Well, you mentioned the transfer up from Illinois State. You got a mascot on Illinois State?
Illinois State, the Redbirds.
Yeah, here we go. Nailed it. Nice time.
I pictured their logo perfectly. It took me a little bit to get the photographic.
I'm proud of you. I was interested to see if you get that one. I'm going to go Travis Jones.
Real quick, John Ridgway, maybe a little bit like a Brett Kiesel. Go remember him from the Steelers.
Nice.
A guy that was a nose tackle pedigree, but played up and down that Steelers front. And there's certain teams that kind of like the interchangeable parts in the front, like the Saints, the Ravens, the Steelers. John Ridgway would be a great piece.
That's a gritty comp right there, Brett Kiesel. I'm going to go Travis Jones from UConn, another guy, more of a nose tackle type. He is definitely more of that dancing bear. He is a big body on the interior, but he's got some athleticism to him. He's got really good balance. He's almost never on the ground. He's still coming along with his use of hands. Did not play at all in 2020 after UConn as a team opted out due to COVID-19. They were the first team to just basically say, we're not playing. But Travis Jones, an interesting prospect moving forward. We've talked about him a number of times here on the show.
Fran, I really mean this. He's like a 2 or 3 round later version of Jordan Davis.
No question. I was going to say that, actually.
Very similar mold, height, weight, body type, positional usage, kind of a dancing panda type, and the way they can make plays out to the numbers. Really fun player.
Let's get into now the linebacker position. Devin Lloyd, a guy from Utah that I know you love, one of the top linebackers in the country.
I mean, I think I'm stamping it, I'm chiseling it, I'm tattooing it. This kid's linebacker 1. He just is checking every box every week. He's ascending every week into his senior campaign. He's a complete 3-down linebacker, blitzing, instincts, coverage, range, run support, getting off blocks. LB1 is going to be down in Mobile, and that should excite a lot of people in this NFL draft.
A number of interesting linebackers on this initial list of announcements. We're going to go now to the Big 12, where Terrell Bernard from Baylor was one of my favorite seniors coming into the year. Just a well-rounded player. He's got all the athletic traits you're looking for. He's got that ability to come down and bang as well. I just like to see some overall, a little bit better consistency, especially as a tackler. But this is a guy that's got range. And I like the ability to move in reverse as well. And another player I know you're really high on is Jesse Luketa from Penn State.
Yeah, kind of a jack of all trades type at Penn State throughout his young career. He's played some off-ball, some outside linebacker, some defensive end. He's one of these Canadian products from Ottawa that seem to be getting steam every year. Really strong at the point of attack. To put on the Ohio State game, holding that 360-pound right tackle, DeJuan Jones, Ohio State, no problem. Actually going to save him for my film room recap here in a couple of minutes. So we'll dive into him a little bit more. But Jesse Luketa, fun player at Penn State.
Yeah, you were texting me as we were watching him this past week. I know you're a big fan of his game. projects as a Sam linebacker. I think a lot of people view him that way. I think a lot of people would say the same thing about Mike Rose from Iowa State. This is a guy who's 6'4", 250. But it's not just like he just plays on the edge. He will play as a stacked player. He'll play out in the slot. So he can do a lot of different things. Has just been stuffing the stat sheet for the Cyclones as a 4-year starter, and he impacts the game in a lot of different ways. I don't know if he's going to be a true impact player at the next level, but this is a guy that has some movement skills. He's got some size to him. So I think this is a player that a lot of people are projecting to be able to certainly make it in the NFL. It's just a question of what that upside is overall. Another guy that I don't think you're questioning necessarily the floor here with Chad Muma, a really intriguing player that I know you're really high on, Ben, from Wyoming.
Yeah, a guy playing really high-level ball out there in the Mountain West, 6'3", 245. He's got size. He's got speed. He's got range. He's got toughness. He is a tackling savant, not just a machine. He's a technically sound tackler, always square to the line of scrimmage, wraps up, finishes ball carriers, secure, reliable tackler that I have no problem making the Leighton Vander Esch comparison to. If you want to go a little bit more of a throwback, maybe a Brian Cushing type, and a lot of people think he reminds them of Logan Wilson. A little bit different style of player, but Logan Wilson's carved out a nice role for the Cincinnati Bengals.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking when you talk Brian Cushing and LVE. I mean, 2 first-round picks. We'll see what happens here with Chad Muma, an interesting player. Aaron Hansford from Texas A&M. This is a guy that was heading to the Senior Bowl a year ago, but it went back, took the extra year of eligibility. And I think that was beneficial for him. This is a guy that made the move over to defense just a couple of years ago, so needed the extra reps after being a kind of a wide receiver, tight end hybrid for the Aggies early on in his career. But Hansford's got athletic traits. You just want to see consistency playing through contact and finishing as a tackler. His eyes not quite where they need to be yet, but upside there. And certainly the skill set to be able to make it as a special teamer early on. DeMarco Jackson from Appalachian State, another guy you feel like can impact that third phase of the game, Ben.
Yeah, absolutely. He's a really thick linebacker, over 600 special team snaps in his career, nearly 200 tackles on defense, former state champion in discus, high school running back. Really interesting background with this kid at App State. He was one of the early invites, too, and early acceptances. I love seeing a kid from App State out there, Daniel Jeremiah, helping out Jim Nagy with that announcement there. DeMarco Jackson may not have a draftable profile, but this kid's going to hang around in the NFL. Book it here, friend.
This is a guy I should have included with our Sam linebackers, with Luketa, with Mike Rose, but Jeremiah Moon from Florida, really interesting body type at 6'6", 230. You don't really see too many guys in the NFL with that body type, but this guy has done a little bit of everything for the Florida Gators. You know, he's played off the edge as a pass rusher. He loops on inside on stunts. He's got the ability to play in space, and he can match up with tight ends. Really interesting kind of skill set there, but he'll get a chance to show that off down in Mobile.
You know, Fran, you know when these kids come out of high school and they just kind of do everything for their team and they're just listed as athlete?
Yeah.
And then in college, they'll figure out are you a quarterback, a running back, a receiver, and maybe move to defense. Jeremiah Moon just needs to have a defensive label because he's going to do whatever you need. And just like you mentioned, he played all over that defense. If he could catch, he might be converting to offense. He might be a guy where his positional projection isn't quite done yet. Really athletic, really long. He's got some tools you can't coach, you can't teach. Exciting player, and you get down to Mobile and maybe find a new home, or a coach crushes on you. That's how these stories start.
Let's go to one more linebacker here. A bunch of linebackers on this list. JoJo Doman from Nebraska.
Yeah, another hybrid type, kind of nickel outside linebacker, really savvy in coverage and out in space. Bit of an older prospect, as I think he's 23 or 24 years old.
Right
Good
now,
game against Ohio State this year, but unfortunately ended his season early with some hand surgery. So hopefully he'll be ready to go in those all-star games, combine. Another special team savant with over 500 special team snaps in his career.
Let's go to the secondary now. Roger McCreary from Auburn. I think this is a guy that's going to be in the running to be the top prospect overall down there at the Senior Bowl. Just checks so many boxes from a cornerback standpoint. Off coverage, press coverage, man coverage, zone coverage, ball skills, toughness, just everything you're looking for. Roger McCreary has that. I don't know that you're going to say that he's elite in any area, but I'll tell you what, you have a corner that can do everything at a high level. That's a valuable prospect. Roger McCreary can do all of that. Marcus Jones from Houston, another really intriguing option, a guy we've broken down numerous times here on this show, Ben, and he's heading to Mobile as well.
And all you really need to know, most prolific punt returner in the country, and I think he was last year as well. Another guy that can play some defensive back for you. He's a special teams ace with his return ability. I love the comparison to former Houston defensive back, running back, returner Brandon Wilson, another guy with a hybrid skill set. Brandon Stevens, don't forget, he came from UCLA to SMU last year, went to the Ravens kind of in the mid-rounds pretty early.
Yeah,
he was another guy that played some offense, some defense, some return ability.
I like that.
The NFL loves these guys. A little unconventional, but he's a guy that's got some tools.
Caleb Evans from Missouri. I actually studied him late on Sunday. I had not studied him. He transferred up from Tulsa, where he played in 2020. He's got tools, man. I mean, he's over 6 foot. He's listed 6'2". I want to say like 185, 190. So he's a little bit lean, but this is a guy who moves pretty well. I think he's got route instincts in man. He's got route instincts in zone. The only thing is he just had a very little ball production. He had 0 interceptions coming into the year. So even though he had played a lot for Tulsa, just could not finish at the catch point. He had a couple drop picks in games that I watched, but he also had some nice plays on the ball where he did, some nice looking lean down the field, pressing the wide receiver to the sideline, trying to find the ball late. Like he's got those traits. He just wasn't able to finish. So I do think that he's got the ability to be a top 3 corner for an NFL team. We'll see what he looks like in person down in Mobile. Cam Taylor-Britt from Nebraska, it seems like has a kind of similar skill set as well.
Yeah, he's a fun player as well. Kind of a thick, tough corner out there, over 200 pounds, 6 foot, 205, tough, athletic. Another guy over 500 special team snaps in his career. He's a guy I think is going to test pretty well with good size. It's these types he may be kind of converting to a nickel safety position. At the end of the day, contribute on special teams, figure out the rest later. He's a guy you just want in your DB room.
I tweeted this out about our last corner, Joshua Williams from Fayetteville State. There are always those corners, or those those prospects, Ben, that when you're talking with scouts, whether it's in the summer or the early part of the fall, and you ask, hey, like, I heard about this Joshua Williams kid from Fayetteville State. Someone will say to you, yeah, but don't talk about him. Because I don't want any buzz building up about this kid. Joshua Williams came up multiple times that way, talking with some friends just around the league. And so interesting that he's heading down to Mobile. Maybe the secret's out on the kid from Fayetteville State. Let's go now to the safety spot. Jaquan Brisker from Penn State. He's another player I talked about. Aaron Hansford earlier in the show was going to the Senior Bowl a year ago, ended up going back for that extra year. That extra year has paid off for Brisker.
Yeah, absolutely. Brisker is a guy that certainly isn't unknown to scouts and fans across college football. Pretty well-known player, 3-year starter at strong safety, free safety for that Penn State Nittany Lion team. Could have come out last year. Got the same exact invite, if I'm not mistaken, about the same time. Yep. Accepted it, ended up going back. He was a JUCO transfer, really good speed, kind of a cornerback pedigree. Yep. With his ability to find the ball in the air and his ball skills, a little bit inconsistent with his tackling. Had some issues, cleaned it up. Having some more issues this year. So I'm really interested to see how the NFL views him. He might be a ball hawking safety on the back end.
I believe he was a corner in JUCO and then made the move to safety once he got
very popular Lackawanna Community College. That gets a lot of transfers into the Power 5.
Let's go to a couple of max safeties here. Tyson Anderson from Toledo. I tweeted this out about Anderson. It's kind of similar to what you said about Travis Jones from UConn, where it's like, he's the round 2, round 3, round 4 version of Jordan Davis. That's kind of how I feel about Tyson Anderson. He's like the mid-round version of Kyle Hamilton from Notre Dame, where I think when you look at Anderson, he's got a unique body type at 6'3", 210. He can come down and hit you, but he also has a lot of coverage versatility as well. I thought he was instinctive. He could finish. He could match up with tight ends. He can blitz. He can do a lot of different things on the back end. I thought he was a really sound tackler. I really like Tyson Anderson. And I think when you look at Sterling Weatherford from Miami, Ohio, nearby, I think when you look at Weatherford, he's got a similar kind of skill set as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of an interesting player, being a 6'4", 225-pound safety. Kind of an oversized safety, but he's down in the box. Really good range. He's just a massive player out there, but he's tough. He's got long legs, long strides, eats up ground in a hurry. Another special teamer. He's played a lot of good football for Miami, Ohio. Do not scout the helmet on that one, Sterling Weatherford. He'll knock your head off. He'll tackle in the run game. He's got ball skills, special teams. He could be one of the darling sleepers of this draft.
Yeah, he was a guy watching him. He was another one who's listed like as an athlete coming out because they weren't sure if he's going to be a tight end or a safety. And he'll lay a hit on you, especially in coverage. I just want to see him be a little more consistent downhill in the run game as a tackler. Had more misses there than I would have liked to see. Jalen Petrie from Baylor, interesting player, and then he's kind of one of those safety linebacker hybrids. He was a big nickel down there for Baylor the last couple of years. And I talked with people over the summer that had him in the linebacker bubble. But now it seems like more kind of looking at more on the back end. He's listed as a DB here with the Senior Bowl, but that hybrid skill set will serve him well. If whether you're talking about the
the Jeremy Chin kid from a couple years ago, Southern Illinois, was a second-round pick by the Carolina Panthers. I think that's kind of a comp that's being floated around with Jalen Petrie. Just an interesting skill set to look for here moving forward. One last one for you, going to the SEC. Leon O'Neal Jr. from Texas A&M.
Yeah, safety with good size at 6'1", 210, 3-year starter in the SEC. He's seen a lot of football down there, plays some special teams. Again, has some tackling issues at times, but really good athleticism. Has been a really good safety tandem down there at A&M with Damani Richardson. So those two each week make big plays in the run game, in the pass game, on the back end. Just needs to clean up some inconsistencies out there. Let's see where his best positional fit will be in the NFL.
Impossible. I mean, that Texas A&M defense, there's so many players, but when you're watching them, it's like, oh yeah, there's that number 9 again, showing up, constantly showing up, watching other players on that.
And real
defense.
quick, Fran, how about an SEC team that I don't think gets enough love and attention for being a powerhouse? These Kentucky Wildcats.
Yeah.
We're about to talk about another one, but last year, I mean, Jamin Davis was a first rounder, Kelvin Joseph a second rounder, Brandon Eccles is playing some good football in the NFL, Quentin Bohanna's with the Cowboys. We have a bunch of guys coming out this year. Why don't you do a little profile on Yusef Corker?
Yeah, Yusef Corker, 6 foot, 197 pounds, a little bit of a lean safety. He was a corner in high school that made that move over to the safety spot when he got to Kentucky. And he was the number 1 corner in the state in Georgia when he was coming out. Like, he was a pretty big time recruit that Mark Stoops was able to pluck from the state of Georgia. And this is a guy, look, I think he needs to get a little bit better as a tackler. I think the production isn't always quite what you would expect for a guy that was a former corner. But with his skill set, I think that there are going to be some interested parties, and clearly one of the top safeties in the senior class. I'm excited to see him up close and see how he moves compared to some of these other safeties that we're talking about in this group, Ben. So that wraps up. We went through a bunch of names. Again, all the top defensive players that they've announced so far here for the Senior Bowl, and we'll continue going through those announcements, not just for the Senior Bowl, but for the Shrine Bowl as well. The 2 top All-Star games here in the pre-draft cycle. Ben, let's look to this weekend here in college football and give out some game balls. And I'll tell you, I watched every snap of the Oklahoma-Iowa State game. And while that became close in the end, Iowa State did everything they could to try and win this one. Charlie Kohler put the team on his back offensively, tried to will the Cyclones to victory. But the difference in this game was the Oklahoma defensive front. And this is a group that we talked about a lot in the summer and in the early parts of the season. And Oklahoma's kind of been up and down. I know, they just had their first loss a week ago. So, it's been a weird season for them. But this defense was outstanding against Iowa State. Jalen Redmond was everywhere, the defensive tackle. He had a scoop and score and a touchdown where he looked really athletic. But not just that. I mean, he was really disruptive against the quarterback. He moved Brock Purdy off his spot a number of times. Perrion Winfrey had a huge hit on a ball carrier, cutting back against the grain. Nick Benito had a sack in the fourth quarter on one of those drives late in the game. Isaiah Thomas moved the quarterback off his spot a number of times. We talked about how talented this defensive front was coming into the year. And I think of all the games I've watched of Oklahoma so far, this is the one where they really, really stood out, and they needed them in this game.
Yeah, it's a really good front out there, and they were dominating that Iowa State team. And I'm breaking my own rule again. I'm going to go with an ineligible player get my game ball, and it's not going to be the high riser Kenny Pickett, but the guy on the other end, a lot of these Kenny Pickett passes this year, in wide receiver Jordan Addison, who this guy has come up huge for Kenny Pickett, a guy that hasn't had the help on the other end throughout most of his career at Pitt, leading college football and drop passes throughout his career. But Jordan Addison leading college football in receiving touchdowns, up to 15 now, 1,200 yards. And just look at his tape last week against Virginia, 17 targets, 14 receptions, 202 yards, 4 touchdowns. Huge day. He's been doing it all season long. 74 catches on the year, averaging 17 a catch. Explosive player, competitive at the catch point. He'll do some moves on you, yards after catch, and the quick game stuff. He's been on the receiving end at a lot of these Kenny Pickett highlight plays. So Kenny Pickett's been getting a lot of love. Don't forget about the guys doing the dirty work on the other end.
No, you're never afraid to peel back the curtain on who's really making the plays for any of these teams. So Jordan Addison certainly named to file away for the future. For my one play takeaway, I'm going to go back to that Iowa State game. I mentioned Charlie Kohler with what he did down the stretch. He made a number of awesome catches down the stretch for this game. But for me, Ben, the bigger one for me, Breece Hall, who we've talked about as potentially the top running back in this class, and we know what he is as a runner. The question has been with him and with some others in this class has been, well, what is he as a pass catcher, not a high-volume receiver? Well, in this game, it was early fourth quarter as they're trying to mount their comeback. He had a
ridiculous one-handed catch on a wheel route down the left sideline where he kind of pulls it in over the shoulder. Big time catch, regardless of what position you play, much less as a running back. So, okay, show off the ball skills there. Then in the drive where they tried to tie it late in the game, he nearly gets another one off a tipped pass. He was well covered. The defender jumped up, made a play, and tipped the ball at the last second. So he had to kind of adjust and nearly pulled it in there as well. But Breece Hall, maybe he's one of these guys. I remember this was a big thing with Jonathan Taylor at Wisconsin. What is he on third down? What is he on third down? And then he ends up having 30 catches as a rookie last year in 2020. So just because a guy didn't do it in college doesn't mean a guy can't do it when he gets to the NFL. Breece Hall might be that guy just to kind of file away. And remember, just because the production wasn't there doesn't mean that he can't catch passes at the next level.
There are a number of college football offensive schemes that just don't feature the running back in the pass game for a variety of reasons, whether it's a preference from the coach or what maybe it's a heavy, jet protection team, and you like to keep that running back in there. I think A.J. Dillon's going through that with the Packers too. We're saying, this guy can catch all of a sudden, and everybody's saying he's always been able to catch. They just didn't use him at Boston College. So same kind of thing with Jonathan Taylor. Just because you didn't see it doesn't mean they can't do it. So there's always a little bit of discovery there. But my one play takeaway, no secret here, Fran. We're going downtown James Brown to the Jameson Williams touchdown on the other end of Bryce Young against Arkansas. That pogo, that post and go against quarters, it looked like. I just love the throttling of his paces on the double move. And then when he wants to hit that speed, he gets the top speed in a hurry with those long legs, the long stride. And how about the ball from Bryce Young? Absolute dime. And you give him that much time in the pocket to rip a 60-yard throw like that right in the hands of Jameson Williams. I was going to pick maybe the slant that he took, for another 40, 50 yards.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up. Yep.
He's a fun player. He had 8 for 190 and 3 touchdowns. So spin the wheel, pick one of those. They were impressive.
Well, that's the thing is, like, how many times have we seen already this season with Jameson Williams where he catches, whether it's the slant that he takes to the house or like the dig or the shallow cross or something at the intermediate area where then he just becomes the fastest guy on the field, or a guy who's 6'2", 195, a little bit of sub 200. Impressive for a guy with that frame to move like that.
Yeah, he is a very explosive player. He gets the top end speed very quick, but he's also very loose, catches the ball very well. He's a 3-level receiver. I'm going to have a hard time not making him receiver 1 when it's all said and done, because I think he's a guy that's going to probably cook at like a 4.40, maybe in a 4.38 type of time, in shorts and a t-shirt. He's going to look good in all these combines and workouts and on the practice field. He's a really impressive player. And I know the receiver group's a little kind of murky at the top, whether it's Olave or whether it's Garrett Wilson or, Drake London, or is it, Traylon Burks, who had a great game against Alabama, by the way. A bunch of big plays, nice catches down the seam, some catch and run stuff. Interesting receiver group. May not be super rich at the top, may not have any go in the top 10, top 15, but Jameson Williams might end up being the first off the board.
And I think if you're looking at like who's got an A trait, like I think that we've seen like these explosive qualities from Jameson Williams to say like, all right, like that guy's got special ability. Maybe that sets him apart from some of the other guys.
Do you make anything, Fran, about the most of the quality, well-rounded receivers in the NFL as far as hands, route running, releases, ability to win vertically, win at the catch point, are all in that 6'2", kind of 190 package? That whether it's Devontae, whether it's Keenan Allen, whether it's DeAndre Hopkins, they all have a similar type of profile to him. Justin Jefferson seems like he's a year or two away from being in that elite group as well.
Maybe less, yeah.
Jameson Williams has a kind of a clone body skill set to a lot of those guys. I'm just saying, that he's not that small, undersized, speedy guy that can take the top off the defense, but a guy that can really win at any level of the defense. He fits the profile of a lot of guys that do that on Sundays.
Yeah, he is going to be a really interesting player to track here in the coming months and potentially coming years. If he goes back for another year, obviously, he's got some eligibility left there with the Tide. For our down-the-road freak shows, look, you mentioned Bryce Young and some of the balls that he delivered, and he was a guy I initially wrote down, but I almost think that this could be a discussion about just what this quarterback picture could look like for not 2022, but for
2023, 2024, we're seeing some of these young quarterbacks start. Obviously, look, what CJ Stroud has been doing for Ohio State, you like just pair these two together and just say like, yeah, like really interesting group. I know we were high on DJ Uiagalelei from Clemson coming into the year. He's had certainly his ups and downs. There's the kid down at Coastal Carolina that has continued to flash. I know he's eligible as a redshirt sophomore, but not really a lot of buzz that he's going to enter. So this is a future guy as well. But this young group of quarterbacks in college football, just something to track here moving forward. And Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, both just looking outstanding this week, and just something to keep an eye on here down the road.
Yeah, absolutely. They're both putting up really good seasons. Bryce Young with 37 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. CJ Stroud, 36 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, really high numbers, very productive, prolific. I'm going to stick with my Wisconsin running back, Braylon Allen.
Dude, he's been ridiculous.
He's getting some more national buzz now. He's starting to make some highlights that are making their way on a Sports Center or whatnot. 22 for 228 and 3 touchdowns over the weekend. That's now 8 straight 100-yard games. And this isn't a Jonathan Taylor type of package. This is more of a Ron Dane type of package. This guy's 6'3", nearly 240. This is a big boy with wheels and can run between the tackles. He's a fun player. Braylon Allen, Wisconsin, filed away for the down the road freak show.
So with that size, I think a lot of fans now, like for modern NFL, is like, okay, is he Derrick Henry? Do you feel like he's Derrick Henry? Like, I mean, like, I guess that's going to be the big question. We're very early.
He's a true freshman. He's got 8 straight 100-yard games. I think he's ripped off 200 in the last 4 games. He looks unstoppable. Sure, you want to call him Derrick Henry right now? Yeah, let's call him Derrick Henry. If that's the cream of the crop for the 6'3", oversized, running backs. Right. He's young. He's new on the scene. Let's put him right on the mountain and compare him to the NFL's best rusher, Derrick Henry, Braylon Allen. There's your comp.
There's your comp. Stick that in your pipe.
Right. All right, for the 2025 draft, that comp is done. All right.
Yeah, that's it. Put it in pen. Let's now wrap this up with our film room recap. A guy that we've studied here over the last week, and you teased it earlier, so I'll come to you for it. Penn State's Jesse Luketa. This is a guy, like I said earlier, I mean, you were texting me as you were watching him, really high on what this kid can bring to the table.
Well, he's an interesting player because he doesn't have a true positional home. He's kind of a jack of all trades, but it's kind of a product of his versatility and all the different roles he's been asked to do on this defense. But he's 6'3", 255, played a lot of off ball last year. Remember, Micah Parsons opted out. They lost their Mike linebacker. They moved around a lot of parts. And then this year, he's more of a traditional outside linebacker defensive end. But I love his toughness. I love his range. He's really good on the backside of run plays. Watch that Iowa game, backside of zone. He can scream down the line if you think you're cutting him off. I don't think so. He's got kind of a nasty play demeanor as well, kind of a violent tackler, a guy that gets really fired up when he meets that ball carrier. He can twitch to shoot gaps, but I'm really impressed with his ability to hold the point of attack. I had mentioned that Ohio State tackle. He had no problem kind of holding his gap against, who probably outweighs him by more than 100 pounds. He can beat guys on the second level with stacking and shedding. He can beat blocks with speed as well. He's a violent tackler. I really love his nastiness. Nearly 600 special team snaps as well. He was a guy that, Fran, you said in the summer, I would have no problem taking him on day 3. I thought he was a 5th, 6th rounder. And I thought he's improved that. So right now I have him in that kind of 3-4 category. And I think he's going to be a stud down in Mobile and the combine into draft season. And I think he's going to end up kind of being right on the fringe of a top 50 player. And I struggled finding a comp for him. Now, I really like Eli. Yeah. I liked Eli Harold coming out of Virginia. Okay. And I think he ended up being a 2nd-round pick to the Niners and maybe didn't find the right footing with the scheme, or maybe a Leon Jacobs.
Leon Jacobs him? Is not. That's actually a pretty good one. I like that
and
one.
Fran, we talked about earlier. We're talking about these hybrid Sam players. So it's these guys that play a little off ball, a little edge.
Leon Jacobs is a really good comp.
They're probably a little undersized. That's not going to excite people to say Leon Jacobs. But Leon Jacobs was a really good player at Wisconsin, if I'm not mistaken. Has played some good football with the Jacksonville Jaguars. He's a guy that can wear a lot of different hats. Now, your career can go haywire with that as well, too. Trying to do too much and maybe trying to play positions you're not suited for. So I would love to see Luketa really find a positional home, and that may be with a scheme-specific team. But I really like his temperament. I like his background. And he's a guy that I just think is like kind of an exciting kind of spark plug player, and I would have no problem putting him on my front 7.
I was talking with somebody, you'll really like this line. I was talking with somebody late last week, and I actually used that line of, oh, this guy can wear a lot of hats for a defense. And he said, and the guy said, he was like, yeah, but it depends on what logo's on that on those hats. I think that's right when you talk about a guy like Luketa, because he could go to one team and be used one way, and he could go to another team and maybe he's used a different way, and it doesn't pan out, right? And so I think with a lot of these guys, when you're talking about some of these hybrid skill sets, so much of that is going to be situation dependent. I think a lot of that is, you can say that about any position, and maybe that's kind of an undersold.
I thought you were going to say depends what type of hats, because you can only wear so many sombreros, and if it's a fedora, I don't know how many of those you can wear. And
it's going to be that time of year. They got your hat diversity has got to be a little bit warmer. there's a lot of factors at play, with that. For me, I'm going to go to the offensive line. I'm going to go to the opposite side. I didn't know too much about Luketa from Central Michigan when he was announced for the Senior Bowl last week, and sent a text to somebody and said, like, hey, what's the book on this guy? And I said, how does he compare to Bernard Raymond, who was on the left side? He's the left tackle. We've talked about Bernard Raymond plenty here on the show. And he said, look, he's probably he's more run blocker than Raymond, as more pass protector. And digging into the film over the weekend on Gadecki, 6'5", 310. He's interesting in that he's not played a ton of football. He got there at Central Michigan and redshirted his first year, started all 14 games in 2019 at right tackle, then missed all of last season with an injury and returned this year. So he's actually only been on the field for 2 years, and technically from an eligibility standpoint is only a redshirt junior. The Senior Bowl announced for him, so I'm assuming that means he's definitely coming out for this draft. Now, he has not played a ton of ball. He's only played right tackle. So the lack of proven versatility, that's going to be a question. I do think watching him would not shock me at all if people said he's a better guard than a better tackle. But this guy's got some really impressive athletic traits. He's really fast out of his stance. His play speed's really good. He's a natural bender, really impressive balance. The lateral mobility is there. That's apparent when he's out in space, when he's got to mirror defenders on the move and kind of match guys from a movement standpoint. That's all there. He's got light feet. He's never on the ground. Athleticism there. I think he checks the boxes from a power and play strength standpoint. I don't think he's dominant from a play strength standpoint, but I think he checks the box there. I'd like to see his hand usage get a little bit better, but this is a guy that I think has athleticism. The traits are absolutely there. He just hasn't played a ton, and he has, the lack of proven versatility, I think will ding him a little bit, but that's where the Senior Bowl can come into play, right? And so if he goes down to Mobile and maybe he only plays guard, and he plays both left guard and right guard. Who's the kid from Notre Dame last year that went down? He was the right tackle only for the Irish. And then
Tommy Kramer?
No, he was a right tackle only. I liked the guy. This actually is not a pretty. I'm actually going to write this kid's this as a comp down as soon as I get the name right. But I think when you look at Gadecki and you say, okay, well, this is a kid that has the ability to go down and help himself in Mobile. We could be talking about a day two select, late day two selection.
Robert Hainsey.
Robert Hainsey, thank you. He went to the Tampa Bay Bucks. Hainsey was that kind of. He was on right tackle only at Notre Dame, but he went down there. He played 3, but I think maybe 4 positions in Mobile. That's not a bad comparison. I think that could be something we see here for Gadecki.
Yeah, and just some more info, because he has a oddly succinct bio on the Central Michigan site. This is a guy that played tight end, defensive end in high school.
Yep.
Was actually a preferred walk-on at Wisconsin to play tight end. Initially showed up to Central Michigan to play tight end at 6'5", 285. He said he just wanted to play. So he was just plugging it where it leaks. And so often, what do you say, Fran? You don't find the offensive line room. The offensive line room finds you. And it seems like another one of those kind of stories out there of a tight end kind of converting to offensive tackle that you see so often out there. But he's a guy that obviously the injuries throughout his career kind of a concern. Was also injured a little bit his senior year of high school. So if he's healthy and ready to go, he's put some pretty good tape on. I'm a little surprised to see his invite and acceptance this early in the process.
Yeah, sure.
Considering he's a junior and has some kind of questions about his experience and whatnot. But these are the types that NFL scouts want to dig into more and find more information and figure out, is there a diamond in the rough here? And so sometimes there's guys where their profile, for all intents and purposes, a little rough around the edges sometimes. But you go down to Mobile and you figure who they are, and you save yourself some money, hopefully, as an NFL team and scouting department, by learning and acquiring information at these all-star games. It's not a guessing game out here. So if you have some questions about him, let's get up close and personal and figure out who this kid is and if he can play.
Yeah, he's a really interesting profile. And honestly, like talking it through, and saying like, oh yeah, the Robert Hainsey, like dude, from a body type standpoint, it really matches. And the one thing that Hainsey really struggled with, that I think he also struggles with when he goes up against the longer defensive linemen, watching him against Mizzou, watching him against LSU, some of those longer guys really gave him issues on a couple of reps. So that's something to watch. And that was an issue for Hainsey as well. But just something to watch. Gedeke, intriguing player, a guy that I liked a lot more than I thought I was turning on the film. So we buzzed through a lot of names, probably like 50 guys between the two of us here so far in this segment, Ben. We'll be back later this week. We're breaking down everything to watch here in week 13 of college football, rivalry week here on the horizon in college football. We'll be breaking it all down later this week right here on the Journey to the Draft podcast presented by LifePrint.
Now it's time to hear from you, the fans, in the Draft Mailbag.
Great stuff there from Ben, and we'll be breaking down more of these all-star game acceptances, and obviously we'll be previewing next week in college football later this week right here on the Journey to the Draft podcast. Because of the holiday on Thanksgiving, we will be getting that episode out to you earlier in the week, so stay tuned for that. Hopefully I can get it to you before your commute to visit with family and friends on Thanksgiving for the holiday. Now, let's get to a fan question here, a fan mock draft from our Draft Mailbag, and again, the best way to hit us up and to get onto the show is to go onto Apple Podcasts. Leave us your question or your mock draft right in that comment section over on our Apple Podcast page. I want to get to Write Him, who left a 5-star review saying, "Hey, Fran, love this season of the show with the debates between you, Ben, and Dane, as well as the interviews with the scouts, which always bring something new to learn and understand. I wanted to share with you my first mock draft, and my only 2 disclaimers are, number 1, I did not draft a quarterback because I'm not in love with any of the top selections, and number 2, because this mock draft is so early, the rankings on the players are pretty low, so I would believe a lot of these players won't be where I got them, but regardless, here's what I got. Also, I made some trades to pick up some more picks in the future. So let's go through this mock draft here from Write Him. And again, this is for the Philadelphia Eagles only. Number 6 overall, Michigan pass rusher Aiden Hutchinson. And we've talked about Hutchinson a lot here on this show. This is a guy that I think most believe is a consensus to be a top 10 selection. Disruptive player against the run, against the pass, the competitiveness, the toughness, the athleticism, the disruption. This is a guy that's really, really fun to watch. So he would be an early impact player for wherever he ends up. Let's now go to the next pick. 14 overall, Georgia nose tackle Jordan Davis. And I will say, if you have not seen 2 pictures of Jordan Davis from this past week, you have to make sure you go find them on social media. One was him standing next to another defensive lineman on the Georgia Bulldogs who was standing next to a normal human being, and just seeing the sheer difference in size between Jordan Davis and not just one of his peers, but between someone that looks like you or I. It was really eye-opening. And then number 2 was a shot rather from the Georgia's their big win over, I believe they played Charleston Southern this week, and him jumping up in the air celebrating. A guy that big should not be able to jump the way that he does. That is, first of all, it's a representation of his athleticism and his explosiveness in his lower half and all that, but just a freak show, Jordan Davis. So him at number 14 overall, that is starting to measure up pretty well with his value. Another Georgia Bulldog here in this mock draft from Write Him. 21 overall, linebacker Nakobe Dean. And I think it's going to be really interesting, the discussion with all of these Georgia players in the front 7 because there are so many that people are going to be talking about. And we talked, I gushed last week about Quay Walker. We talked about Channing Tindall. Just those 3 linebackers alone, obviously, look to be top 2-3 round draft picks. I think when you look at the rest of that defensive front, we just talked about Jordan Davis, but just so many players on that defense. We're not even talking about the secondary right now with Lewis Sine and DK Kendrick. It's just a really, really impressive group overall. Write Him going back to the linebacker well with the next pick at 41. So Christian Harris, the linebacker from Alabama. This is just loading up on the defensive side of the football. Another Georgia Bulldog, DK Kendrick. So I think when you look at Hutchinson, Jordan Davis, Nakobe Dean, Christian Harris, DK Kendrick, this is a completely reshaped defense. So much young talent, but I think that kind of speaks to the potential the Eagles have here in this draft. And that's why you should, if you're an Eagles fan, you should be subscribed to this show, because you need to be knowing who all these players are. Christian Harris, to me, look, this is a former high school safety who can play downhill and is so violent. And he's such a good tackler and has all the physical traits to be that sideline to sideline presence, but he defeats blocks so well as well. So I think when you look at Harris, his potential is sky high. DK Kendrick's got man skills. He's got zone skills, a really talented corner. He started his career at Clemson, transferred to Georgia this past year after having a little bit of an off-field deal over at Clemson, but transferred down to Georgia and has been playing really well down there for the Bulldogs. First offensive player selected 72 overall, Notre Dame center Jarrett Patterson. Alabama wide receiver John Mechie III. He was a guy that a lot of people were really high on coming into the year. He's been overshadowed a little bit by Crimson Tide, their wide receiver Jamison Williams, who had an outstanding game this past week. But I think when you look at John Mechie, he's a really crafty player. He's really reliable at the catch point. He can separate. Really fun player. Daniel Faalele, the pick here at number 146. I would imagine this is one of the players, Wilt, that you're referring to as you got him a little bit later than you think he'll go. I can't imagine that Faalele falls down to this point in the draft, but to pair him and let him develop in the background with some of the other Eagles offensive linemen here. This guy has got a very similar background to Jordan Mailata. He grew up in Australia, didn't play football, transferred up to the States, and instead of jumping right into the NFL, he was young enough that he could go to college and ended up committing to Minnesota. He had offers from everybody. Everybody went after him, but because he's not from the States, he was like, hey, look, I'm going. I don't have any allegiances anywhere. I want to go to where I feel the most loved. And Minnesota did a great job of recruiting him. He ended up going with the Gophers and started from day one, despite not playing any football growing up, and has been really, really impressive. I'm excited to watch more of Daniel Faalele from this year. A few more players just to round this out. 3 more picks. Tariq Castro-Fields, a really interesting corner from Penn State, local kid. He actually went to high school with Eagles rookie Zach McPherson. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Avonte Maddox, I think, from a skill set standpoint. He's played a little bit outside, a little bit inside, and I think he could do a little bit of both in the NFL. Zach Charbonnet from UCLA has been a really productive player for Chip Kelly this season as a junior, a downhill back, no nonsense type of back, and then corner Sheridan Jones rounds out this mock draft. Also picking up a future second rounder and 2 extra 4th round picks. So write him planning for the now and for the future. So good stuff there. Really good mock draft. And again, if you've got a mock draft you want us to break down, make sure you head on over to our Apple Podcast page. Leave your mock draft or your question or your power rankings, whatever it is, in that comment box. We will answer it here on a future show. And it's a great way to throw us your support, because the more comments and ratings we get, the more visible this show becomes for other people that are looking for NFL draft podcasts. Really appreciate everybody that has thrown us your support in recent weeks. Like I said, we'll have this next show out a little bit earlier this week. Myself, Ben Fennell, Ross Tucker, Eric Galko, we'll be back breaking things down, getting you ready for this week in college football ahead, right here on the Journey to the Draft podcast presented by Life Brand.
When the clock hits all zeros, the game might be over, but the action is not. Join us for the post-game show presented by Rico for instant reaction. Watch live as Coach Nick Sirianni and Eagles players come to the podium and meet with the media. We will make sure you do not miss a word. Myself, Ike Reese, and Gabriella DiGiovanni will also break down the game live at the desk and hear from Eagles insider Dave Spadaro to get his thoughts. The post-game show presented by Rico can be seen on PhiladelphiaEagles.com, the Eagles mobile app, and the team's social media channels.